Since the beginning of time, people have been playing role-playing games. One of these such games is...
Wrong. That wasn't the first RPG.
You didn't even let me finish.
I didn't need to. You defined a time before RPGs existed.
Okay, yes. So they didn't exist at the beginning of time, but they have been around for a really...
Nope. Max 67 years.
What? How? Jurybox has been around longer than that.
Non-RPG.
Yes, it is. It's the definition of a role-playing game.
It's not a video game.
Well, it's still technically an RPG.
Yes, but we really only do video games here?
Fair enough. This segment is brought to you by the cast of The Origins of Gaming.
Cue the intro.
Hello everyone, and welcome to The Origins of Gaming. I'm Scarlet McCaw, and joining me today is
Hey everybody, I'm your guy Hunum,
co-host. The genre we will be looking at today is RPG. Hey, wait a second, haven't we already done this one?
While we did do MMOs, we did not specifically cover role-playing games, and as such, we are now covering them. The first RPG was Colossal Cave Adventure. Colossal Cave Adventure was a text-based adventure game released in 1976.
Is that an RPG?
Well, there are a few definitions of what a role-playing game is, which can often make this very confusing. So, I believe it'd be fitting for us to go over a few and tell the viewers which definition we will be going with.
Sounds like a plan.
First definition. Dr. Marinka Copier states in her paper, Connecting Worlds, Fantasy Role-Playing Games, Ritual Acts, and the Magic Circle, that, from a commercial perspective, digital offline games like Baldur's Gate, BioWare 1998 onwards, are also considered RPGs. She further says that she would argue that these games don't necessarily encourage roleplay because players cannot add their own information or discuss over the rules as in tabletop live action and online role-playing. Therefore, she considers offline RPGs to be adventure games, rather than the role-playing games their names suggest.
Okay, then by this definition, Colossal Cave Adventure is technically an RPG, because the player can make up a story as to why they're looking for treasure.
Yes, but this definition is far too specific for our needs. If we follow it, then most games we typically consider RPGs will not be RPGs.
Then why don't we go in the opposite direction? The standard definition of an RPG that most people accept is taking the role of a specific character. That should work just fine.
While I like that definition, it's a little too broad for us to cover.
Then what do you propose we use?
The definition I recommend is a game that has customization or relies more on intellect rather than reflex. With this definition, games like Ratchet and Clank won't be considered RPGs, but games like Chrono Trigger and Xenoblade Chronicles will.
Perfect! Now we can talk about the games that influenced the genre. We won't be able to cover every game, but I feel we should get at least some of the more important ones.
I agree. Where do you think we should start?
Let's start with Final Fantasy VII. This game revolutionized the genre with a deep story and 3D graphics! Final Fantasy VII was a 3D RPG that had good story, relatable characters, even though they had crazy hair, and solid gameplay.
This isn't the only RPG to be inspiring, though. Another series that has inspired a lot of games is Dragon Quest. I'll be honest, I haven't played too many of these, but I do like them. Their stories are often sprawling epics, set across huge and varied world maps, and their gameplay is pretty solid as well.
Another great turn-based RPG is Pokemon. Pokemon is a strange one. There aren't many games like it. The only game that does come to mind is Yokai Watch, which is heavily inspired by Pokemon. Pokemon is just one of those games that's unlike anything else. Instead of having your character fight, you command creatures called Pokemon instead. There are over 800 of them now, making it hard to catch them all. And you can have any 6 you want to fight on your team. The core elements of the game are solid. For a supposed children's game, the mechanics are easy enough to learn, but players can also implement complex strategies for an extra fun challenge. Multiple websites exist for explaining hidden mechanics. These include Cerebi.net, Bulbapedia, and Smogon University. Did you know that even though water types resist ice type moves, the ice type move Freeze Dry is super effective against water types?
Cool! And while these games are cool, there are many more subgenres of the RPG other than turn-based.
That is true. The RPG genre comes in many flavors.
Flavors?
Oh, hush you. The RPG genre has these subgenres. Turn-based, which we've already seen in Pokemon. Action RPG, my favorite. Massively multiplayer RPGs. Shooter RPGs, and hybrids.
The hybrid genre is probably the most important subgenre.
Why's that?
Why? Because, there's a lot of them?
Sounds good enough for me.
The hybrid genre is where we will put games that don't easily fit into other subgenres.
Some good examples of this would be Final Fantasy VII and Chrono Trigger, which both use an ATB system.
ATB stands for Active Time Battle. What this means is unlike traditional turn-based RPGs, the game happens in real time. However, the characters must wait for their action bar to fill before they can take their turn. Let's say you have two characters, one with a speed stat of 10 and the other with a speed stat of 20. Since the second character has double the speed stat, their action bar fills faster, meaning they can attack more often. That's the ATB system in a nutshell.
That isn't the only hybrid, though. We also have games like The Elder Scrolls. This series also falls into its own category.
Yep, the Elder Scrolls games are very unique. Instead of having your entire character based around a single set level, most of the Elder Scrolls games do something rather interesting.
Elder Scroll games like Morrowind and Skyrim have multiple skills to work with. A player can specialize in alchemy, swords, sneaking, lockpicking, and many other skills. After leveling up their skills enough, they may level up their character and increase certain attributes. This makes for unique and dynamic gameplay, because every time you play, you can specialize in something different.
One game that also uses a similar concept is RuneScape. RuneScape was an MMORPG released in 2001 that also features individual skill-based progression. A player can spec in melee, magic, or even archery.
While the two series share that in common, they couldn't be farther apart.
While both games are RPGs, The Elder Scrolls is viewed from the first-person perspective, while RuneScape is third-person. They also play quite differently and have different interaction options for characters in the world. In Skyrim, the player is limited to interacting with NPC characters, since the game is single-player only. RuneScape, on the other hand, is an MMO, or massively multiplayer online game, meaning the player can interact with real people. The choices the games give are also drastically different. In Skyrim, the player may usually interact with any NPC in any way they want. They may steal, kill, or talk to the NPCs. In RuneScape, on the other hand, the player is given limited actions depending on who they're interacting with. For instance, the player cannot steal from most quest-giving NPCs. They also may not attack whoever they like.
This is a good example of two games with a similar core mechanic, but drastically different playstyles.
Indeed, there are many RPG games out there. However, we do not have time to cover them all, so I believe we should wrap this up by covering some of the more influential games we've missed.
Good idea! Let's start with Kingdom Hearts. Kingdom Hearts brought many things to the RPG tabletop. For one, it made convoluted stories more mainstream.
That's a good thing?
That wasn't the only thing it brought with it, though. It also brought two new ways to experience action RPGs. The first way was from the first Kingdom Hearts game. It was essentially a menu you would see in an ATB system game, but the entire game was real-time, making it an action RPG. While this system is rarely seen outside of the Kingdom Hearts series, I still believe it's an important one, as games like the upcoming Final Fantasy VII remake will be using a similar system. The second new kind of experience it brought with it was card gameplay. While this system is generally not too well liked, it's still important because future games have adapted similar card systems.
While some RPG games have adapted card systems, they're not like the Kingdom Hearts ones.
Care to say how so?
Whenever an action RPG introduces a card system today, the cards usually act passively rather than actively, unlike in Kingdom Hearts where they did it the other way around.
Well, I guess you're right.
You could say, I held all the cards. Moving on, we have Earthbound. Earthbound was a unique turn-based RPG published back in 1995. While we here in the US know it as Earthbound, Japan knew the game as Mother 2, because it was the sequel to a game called Mother. Earthbound has been a great influence to many games over the years, inspiring games such as likes of Undertale and Touhou Mother. Earthbound is a work of art, and many fans today in the US are still waiting for the long-awaited Earthbound 2, or as it is known in Japan, Mother 3.
At least we got Earthbound 0. Lastly, we have the game Mass Effect 3. Mass Effect 3 is a good example of a third-person shooter that doubles as an RPG.
While the game is more shooter than RPG, it's a good example of both genres. Mass Effect 3 allows the player to build their character the way they want. It's not as unrestricted as RuneScape or Skyrim as it makes you choose a class though. While the game's format, in RPG form, is not anything new, the originality it brings to the realm of shooters is good. Having a class-based shooter with skill trees you can build makes an interesting and unique environment.
Alright, it looks like that's all the time we have today.
Yep, join us next time as we look at the origins of the fighter genre and important games that define the series.
Until then,
see ya!
bye!
This isn't the only RPG to be inspiring though. Another series that has inspired a lot of games is Dragon's Quest.
Dragon Quest. You messed up Dragon Quest?! How do you do that?!
Dragon's Quest. You know that game from the 80s?
No! Never again!